Evening, I would like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next Board of Education meeting is Tuesday, July 23rd at 8:30 a.m. in the board meeting room. Before we go any further, I'm going to have a motion to amend the agenda to include the appointment of the following positions: the Director of Special Education K-12, the Special Education Program Director for MMS, the Special Education Program Director for DHS, and the Director of Musical and Visual Arts pre-K through 12. We'll add that as 8A. Okay, John moves. Do I have a second? Greg seconds. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Okay. I'll move to the chairperson's report. I don't have much to say beyond our sincerest congratulations to our graduates who, the class of 2024. We wish them all the very best in their next set of endeavors. Thanks to all of those who supported the ceremonies, who sang in them, who played instruments in them, who filmed them, Jeff, and ran around and made sure everything worked, as he's doing right now. I wish everyone a wonderful summer, lots of recreation, and good luck to summer school. With that, I'll pass it to you, to public comment.
Read this? Okay, sorry. Good evening. If anyone in person would like to participate in public comment, please come up to the podium and wait for the chair to recognize you. Please state your name and address for the record, and you will have up to 3 minutes to comment. Okay, no public comment at this time. And there are no raised hands.
Okay. I will move on to Alan, to the superintendent's report.
I don't have too much more to add, Madam Chair, but I'll reiterate just very briefly what you said. I just want to thank everybody. It's a very proud moment, I will say, as a superintendent, every time I go to these moving up ceremonies or to graduation, which was absolutely beautiful. Thank you for supporting the rain date, because it sort of worked out for us, because Friday was not that good. So it all worked out in the end. Thank you. Preparations for summer school are underway, and transportation will be shared on Thursday with families. I do want to recognize the Representative Tracy Mara for her work at the legislative level with our delegation. And as you know, we went back for additional funds for the HHR, and that had to go through legislation in order to not have to go through some other processes with DAS, which we prefer not to go through. And that legislation was passed by the governor and signed by the governor. So we're good to proceed with the reimbursement rates and for the additional funds. So we're all set with that. But I want to just thank Representative Mara just for her efforts.
Thank you. Okay. May I have a motion to approve, we'll do approval of the minutes. May I have a motion to approve the following minutes of the regular meeting held on June 11th, 2024. Robin, seconded by Sarah. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Board committee reports. John?
Was it the finance committee met last week, but I think it was last Thursday? Forget.
Something like that.
We are running a slight surplus on top of the special appropriation. And when I say slight, like at $1,400, which Rich will review.
Okay. Anyone else with a committee? Sarah?
The curriculum committee met last week. We had our literacy update. We talked more about curriculum writing, and we were introduced to EduPlanet, which will be rolled out to families later this summer, which is an exciting piece of work. So thank you, Amy, for that.
Just following, you mentioned in the meeting that the memo the board is expecting on EduPlanet is forthcoming. Okay. On the subject of memos, HHR has started. What I'll do is have the project team put together a brief memo for the board on what is happening over the summer, so everybody's aware of what the next steps are on that project plan. Okay. But of course, that did start on Monday and is moving forward. Hoorah. It says 8A. It said it's now 7A.
7A,
Not 8A. Okay, so we'll move immediately to the appointments. May I have a motion to appoint Dr. Scott McCarthy as Director of Special Education K-12? Sarah moves. Is there a second? John seconds. All those in favor? That is unanimous. May I have a motion to appoint Ms. Sarah Ramelay as Special Education Program Director for MMS? John moves, Robin seconds. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. May I have a motion to appoint Ms. Janine Newell as Special Education Program Director, DHS? Sarah moves, Robin seconds. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. May I have a motion to appoint Mrs. Colleen Thompson as Director of Music and Visual Arts, Pre-K through 12? Robin moves, Sarah seconds. That all in favor? That is also unanimous. Thank you to Dr. McCarthy, Ms. Ramelay, Ms. Newell, and Mrs. Thompson for taking on these new roles, and best of luck. Okay. Discussion and possible acceptance of the contemplated gift from the Community Fund, Dr. Adley and Dr. Dad. I see.
Alicia's on the screen, and we have Janet here is with us, Janet King, the Executive Director over at the Community Fund at their end. And thank you for all the work you do in the town, Janet, not just this particular project. And we're pleased to accept or bring before you this evening the donation for $100,000 that would constitute the full cost of the program for 1 year. This is a 1-year program that's been funded for 1 year, and it would have to come back through the same process for donation and or come through the budget process if it was going to be continued. So this is the 1 year. I will say that the Community Fund has done amazing fundraising and have raised $60,000. The other $40,000, as I noted in the submission, will be funded through the opioid settlement through the Office of the Town's Director of Health. So Mr. David Knopf, we've had that discussion, and that's how that is going to proceed. So as soon as we get the $100,000, we will proceed with the hiring process and so on. Janet is here if she would like to speak to it, or otherwise, I don't know if Alicia wants to say anything, but that's the description. And I'm thrilled that we're able to provide this resource to the middle school.
Okay, would either of you all like to say anything?
I would just like to reiterate my gratitude for Janet and Community Fund and all their hard work in getting this important initiative in the middle school.
Okay, thank you. And of course, thank you, Janet. Of course, from a policy perspective, we don't receive anything that obligates us. So effectively, we're running a pilot, and we'll have to see, Alan, is that correct? Sort of how this works, and then decide from there, as you noted.
Correct. It's
how we
the
might
same
fund it.
process as we went through at the high school.
Did we receive a donation at the high school?
Essentially, we had a grant.
We had a
We had a grant. Yeah, okay. Other board questions, John?
Yeah, just along those lines, I mean, how are you going to be measuring the success of this as to, let's assume we don't have another generous gift next year. So how are you going to assess it in terms of your priorities and whether or not to bring it as a taxpayer funded program if you were to do that?
Well, it'll have to be given the full year opportunity to play out in terms of how the counselor is utilized, because if it comes through in December, it's really half a year in December. It really is a hard time to just sort of evaluate it based on a half year. So we're going to have to look at it the full year in terms of giving it a chance to take traction, see how it has been utilized by the students. The feedback, we did the same thing with the high school, and we brought back numbers from the high school to validate that we would continue with that. And there was a need, and it was being utilized at the high school. So we would do something similar here at the middle school level. We'll use a wee bit of data, qualitative and quantitative data to evaluate it.
I think there may be other questions on that topic, but it may be worth backing up a little bit and reminding everyone that we did identify this as a priority as part of our board and district goals, but that we always had identified it as being something that was grant funded. I think it got a little mixed up because of the timing with the budget process, and that this, in fact, was coincidentally, this grant process was co-occurring with our long-term budgetary discussions, but we always intended for it to be grant funded. Any other board questions, Katie?
So On that comment, I'm curious how we might look at this next year, in conjunction with Alan's comments about needing a full year to evaluate. That could put us quite close to this similar timing of spring in order to continue. So I would just hope that we might have some clarification on how we would be sourcing funds, since it would not likely be in the budget ahead of time.
Dave?
Yeah, I would just follow up that thought to the timing around December. I mean, maybe we have full year goals, maybe we have half year goals,
sure.
because that would coincide with what we're going to have to make a decision, or when we're going to have to make a decision, excuse me. Thank you.
I think that's right. I think we'll need some half-year goals. Yes, Sarah?
I'm just curious about if we as a district knew the sourcing of the community funds funding and whether, like, Ellen, were you aware that the community fund would be going asking for individual donations to fund this? Because when I saw those emails and blasts, I was not aware of that. So I'm curious if that was part of the conversation you had. with
So
everyone.
we have had a number of conversations directly. Janet and I have had a number of conversations directly about that. My understanding of the fundraising is that they would raise the funds through their normal processes of outreach. I didn't know what that outreach meant, and to be honest with you, we weren't explicit about, okay, I'm going to do a special fund, or I'm going to do it as part of the annual fund, or so I didn't know what it was going to look like just on the outside. But I support them going. Sure, they were going to raise funds and make a special effort to raise funds. How that played out in terms of how it was advertised or otherwise that's a different question.
Can I ask Janet a question? If we were to apply for a grant, is that another possible avenue versus, because that's a different, pardon? Yeah,
to go up to
you
the
have to
mic,
come up
sorry.
to the mic to answer if you don't mind.
So right off the bat, the community fund plans on funding this program, part of it, for 3 years. We're committed to that.
Okay,
Kids in Crisis, who runs the Teen Talk program, would not allow us to start this program if there wasn't a 3-year commitment.
okay,
So this year, what we did was we had about 30,000 in our endowment that we had tapped to use this year, which we had not spent. So that's where 30,000 came from. And then we went out to the general public to raise the additional 30. So that made 60. And then I went to town to talk to David Knopf and to John Zergowski about the opioid settlement money. And because John is leaving, he's retired, it's very hard for them to commit for next year. But I would be hopeful that that would also fund the program.
you mean
David.
David?
David Knopf.
Got it. Okay, okay, but is could we still continue? Are both options still options next year? In other words, if staff wanted to, can they apply to you for a grant so that it follows that grant process, or is that not the model?
It's not an option.
Okay,
But Kids in Crisis next year, when they apply for their grant, which we've
Yes.
given a grant to them for, I don't know, 25 years, they are applying for the Teen Talk counselor at Middlesex.
I see. Okay, so it could be funded that way directly to Kids in Crisis.
So to clarify, are we approving a 3-year because that
No.
money is contingent on 3 years or no?
No,
No, it's not
This isn't it,
contingent
no.
on 3 years.
No, okay, Katie,
What is the total for 3 years?
if
What's
we
that?
were to run it for 3 years?
300,000.
300. Yeah.
Is that 100,000 each year?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions? No, okay. With that, I will ask for a motion to accept the contemplated gift from the Community Fund of Darien. John moves. Do I have a second? Robin seconds. All those in favor? That is unanimous. So our thanks to the Community Fund, our thanks for the fundraising and the funds, our thanks to all of those who donated, our thanks to the town for their donation as well. And our thanks to everybody for pulling this together. We look forward to seeing how it works.
Thank
and
you,
to being
Janet.
able to
Much
support-
appreciated. Thank you.
Oh, yes, and to being able to support our middle school students. Thank you, Janet, for being here. Okay. Discussion and possible action on proposed athletic field trips. Chris Manfredonia.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. So what you have in front of you this evening is their yearly batch of the potential overnight trips for the athletic department for the 24-25 school year. Many of these trips require teams or individuals to qualify during the course of the season. So actually, many of them don't actually run, but in the hopeful event that you do qualify, we'd like to have permission to attend some of these contests. Keeping with our past practice, the families who are students who are attending will be responsible for paying for the hotel, food, and transportation to these events. The district pays for the registration fee. The only new request that you see that was not requested last year was there's an additional US squash trip at the end of January for those JV participants, potential overnight trip and national tournament for them.
Okay. Are there any questions? Dave?
I was going to make a motion, not a question, sorry.
Well, we can take questions after, but it seems like there's no questions anyway. So Dave, I assume you're taking the motion to approve the proposed athletic field trips for the 2024-25 school year?
Yes, I am.
Okay, is there a second? Robin, all right, all those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great summer.
You too.
Thank you.
Annual report on donations.
So at the time of the report, we had donations of 462,908. With the approval of Teen Talk at the middle school, that brings it over $500,000 to 562,909. Some of the highlights are we did receive over $350,000 from the Darien Foundation for both the video wall and robotics. The Blue Wave Booster Club donated over $40,000 for various athletic activities. DAEG donated $5,000 for Holly Clark. Darien Music for Youth, $5,000 for musical instruments, and then the high school PTO, the Wellness Center furniture for just under $11,000.
Okay. So Rich, one of the things that is true about this memo is though that these are the donations that go through some sort of formal process, right? There's quite a bit of money raised on behalf of our schools that doesn't show up in this report. Can you
Correct.
talk a little bit about that?
So sometimes it's whether it could be car washes, it could be voluntary fees in athletics, it could be fees for field trips and things like that. All kind of flow through the student activities. These are formal donations, whether by an organization or a parent and themselves. And then the threshold follows the board policy. So if it's under $500, the principals can accept. If it's under $2,000, Dr. Adley can accept, and then obviously above goes to the board ed.
And then so the PTOs, for example, often donate things like people coming to speak, and those
Correct. Yep.
also don't show up.
So sometimes the PTOs will pay the guest author directly themselves. So those are not necessarily donations that we accept.
Okay, thanks. John, then Sarah.
Do we have a way of calculating that? That don't go through the formal donation process?
So anything where we receive the money, we do. If the PTOs, for example, pay the individuals themselves, there's like a record written by the principal where they accept that that's happening, but we don't actually see the dollar amount. If that makes sense.
So there's no way of calculating the dollars raised, for example, the PTOs that are given in kind, if you will. Like a speaker is paid directly from the PTOs, but that has a value.
Not without reaching out directly to the PTOs to get that. If the money comes to us and then we pay the PTO, then yes.
Sarah.
I think I'm following up on John's point here. I think it would be helpful for the board as a whole to know how much money is being spent in our schools. I think that number is huge, being a former PTO chair and CDSP chair, and I know how much money is being spent. And I just think it would be good that the public understands that our budget doesn't actually fund the entirety of what we offer, or what is offered to our kids. So I would love to be able to capture that number somehow. I don't know how to do it, but.
Is there a way, those are organizations that are run separately, their own LLCs in many cases?
So with the PTOs, we could reach out to the PTOs and see if we can kind of collect that data and then put it together with this. I'm sure we can come up with something.
Yeah. I mean, I think related to that, like there's a lot of organizations that, sorry, I just seen you. There's a lot of organizations that fundraise on behalf of the schools, and, whether or not that impacts our ability also to fund at times. Katie?
Thank you. Sarah, your point is well taken that there are a lot of costs that are not inside our budget that go to running and operating our schools. However, I would caution this board to focus specifically on one category of organization that supports it. Rich listed a handful of other ways, that that's not even comprehensive, right? Even just in talking about athletics, for example, right? Like I think we can all think about individual fees and things that we paid. So I want us to exercise good judgment in looking gift horses in the mouth while also acknowledging that there's a lot that is outside of our budget that make our schools what they are.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think if we did take a look, we would need to understand. I think one of the things would be helpful for the board to understand, like, again, we can see here individual, but as Rich was talking, Darien Foundation is donating at XYZ level, Music for Youth, PTOs,
Darien Athletic Foundation.
Darien Athletic Foundation, DAEG. There's quite a few organizations.
Trying to minimize administrative tasks. I think the system that we've set up, which is based on, this kind of reporting, I think that it captures the bulk of it, and anything that's under $500 that's approved by the building principals, you don't want to end up creating much more work, I think, for our finance department, just to.
The only thing I would say, Robin, your point is taken, but for example, if, and again, I'll just stay with the author topic. If somebody compensates an author, that can be a pretty significant donation to the school that is in kind.
And they could get a tax deduction for that if they chose to send that receipt, correct? And then that would appear in our financials
Right.
as an in-kind donation.
Right.
So that would be the process if there were individuals that were doing that.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Someone else have a comment?
I was just going to say, we capture this via our policy in which requires, but there's a heck of a lot more money flowing out there that is not encompassed in our policy that would require reporting. I mean, it's not just below $500. These are large dollar amounts. I mean, I remember during budget season, somebody got up at the podium and called out how much money is given to us, but we're not seeing it here. And that was the reason for my question.
Okay. Discussion on the May 2024 financial report and possible action on proposed budget transfers.
So this is the financial report through May. We are forecasting a deficit of 179,836. The RTM did approve the special appropriation last night for 181,250. So right now the forecast is a positive $1,414. Moving to salaries, salaries are forecasted at a positive $352. As we've mentioned earlier, turnover has fallen short by 324,000. We did have salary savings from a number of positions of 246,000, some salary savings in clubs and councils that did not run of just over 67,000, and the new custodian salary schedule saved just over 11,000. Moving to operating is forecasted a positive $11,036, and that is from the soft freeze and accumulated balances from things like supplies, books, dues, printing, and materials. Fixed is a positive $8,658. The balance is coming from small funds in health insurance, workers' compensation, and then utilities. Equipment is a positive $603, and that is from the soft freeze. And then finally, revenue is forecasted at a deficit of $200,484. That's primarily due to excess costs coming in under anticipated by $199,000. Gate receipts fell short by $4,000, and then we have some small positive balances in parking fees and ELP tuition. We have no transfers for consideration this month.
Okay, any questions? All right. Thank you, Rich. I appreciate that. There's no motion there. So we'll move on to discussion on considerations from the DEI report.
Thank you. So tonight we'll look forward to sharing with the board, look back at what the DEI committee examined. This time last year, actually, is June of 2023, that work was shared with the Board of Education. And at that time, I'm sure there was discussion around how to implement work around the DEI considerations within the strategic plan. So what we're going to do now is just take a quick look back in history. When Ann is getting these slides up, we have some new board members, and also this work was really introduced and discussed a year ago. So as a quick reminder, the DEI team's charge was really around supporting the district vision, mission, core values, thinking about understanding root causes of any inequities that there might be within the system, thinking about how to develop and embed processes and structures for our work, recognizing effective practices that are already in place, and establishing professional accountability in this area. Thanks, Ann. The team at the time developed core values for equity and how would define equity and diversity and inclusion for the district and the study moving forward. There were 6 focus area questions that the group was looking into. So the first 3 have to do with achievement. Achievement 1 is really a question around reading scores and why there might be disparities or differences among subgroups. Question 2 has to do with making sure that we're supporting students of all abilities and learning differences and developing a sense of self, social and emotional wellness, and academic excellence. Achievement 3 had to do with how can we as a team learn more from our achievement data to support the success for all so that all students are achieving excellence. The next area was around climate. And the study was interested in seeing what steps we can take to ensure that we have school climates that are safe, welcoming, inclusive for all students. The next piece was about program participation. We talked about this a little bit when we talked about the Tri-State report, thinking about are there disparities between groups of students who are identified for services and also those who are identified for gifted, and also thinking about access to different programs that are offered throughout the system. And the final is related to professional capacity, how we can create time and space for ongoing professional learning for these efforts. So as a reminder to the community, year 3 of the strategic plan called for the administration to prioritize the considerations that were present in the report. Prioritize the considerations and begin to think about an implementation plan. It's one of the things that we'd like to think about, I think, moving ahead with this work is alignment to the strategic plan. Something that we indicated in the memo to the board was we want to look for opportunities to naturally embed this work where it makes sense in the strategic plan. So things that we're working on, for example, with professional capacity, we would want to align to that goal 4 when we're thinking about professional capacity of staff. And thinking about teaching and learning and reading achievement with maybe subgroups of our students, we would want to align that to goal area 1 of our strategic plan so that the work is embedded where it naturally fits. Achievement 1, what we've outlined in the slides in the presentation are just the actual question, just to reiterate the question that was addressed by the study, the commendations, and the prioritized consideration that the administrative team has identified. At the top of each of the slides, there's a banner that includes alignment to the strategic plan. So in considering the not only the commendations, but the considerations that were within the study, the administrative team, the leadership team, we did a crosswalk between those thoughts and what's in the strategic plan to see where there would be natural alignment. So what we've outlined here is the prioritized consideration for each of these areas. And what we'd like to do then is, as we take a look at the strategic plan moving forward, perhaps during the retreat, see where these items fit in and identify action steps to support progress in these areas. Achievement 2, we see alignment to many areas of the strategic plan, goals 1, 2, 4, and 5. This prioritized consideration is identified in taking a look at master schedules. Again, this is something that came up in the Tri-State report with regard to access for all students having access to programming, especially in the specials areas and the fine arts areas, making sure that our students who receive services are able to access the opportunities that are available. The next achievement, achievement 3, has to do with what can we learn with really utilizing our data to see where we're reaching levels of excellence with students and where we might have some gaps and or we might need to be doing something different with our programming. The consideration here, the team decided to revise a bit. So the original, as you can see, is around developing a portfolio of options for Vision of the Graduate. And one of the things that we wanted to indicate is that work with regard to curriculum should really be ELP through grade 12. And we wanted to think concretely about what portfolio options measure attributes of vision of the graduate along with academic standards. So it's not one or the other, it needs to be both integrated. From a climate perspective, this is related to strategic plan goal 2. There were 2 prioritized considerations. One of them, this is where we've actually made some gains this year. We've already administered the comprehensive climate survey for our stakeholders. And now the plan is to take a look at what that survey indicates, share that with the board and public, and talk about how we will action what we've learned from that survey in district improvement and school improvement initiatives. The other piece is developing an action plan with regard to how we're involving students in that work. The next is program participation. I've discussed this already. There was a question and indication in the report around gifted identification criteria. And taking a look at that, we have a pretty comprehensive identification criteria as is, but we need to be thinking about, I think, how to ensure that we are recognizing students who maybe also have gifts beyond the traditional academic gifts that are most readily recognized in that selection process so far. And the other piece is thinking about how we communicate to families around the selection process. How do we make that very clear and transparent? Of course, aligned to the curriculum of providing resources across all grade levels that ensure that all students are represented and portrayed. Finally, professional capacity. This was around creating time and space for staff development, excuse me. This is really talking with our staff about how to explore different topics that may be challenging, making sure that our staff feel comfortable in addressing anything that may come up in a classroom setting, making sure that our students are being able to respond to all students to have them feel a sense of belonging and included in the setting, school setting. And then monitoring the effectiveness of our recruitment efforts, which Ms. Sion has recently prepared and shared the report with some of our colleagues from the district that was now sitting at the state level. We're awaiting their feedback. The final thing to just mention is that along with the goal areas, all 6 of these, there are some proposed actions. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are some things that you would naturally see, of course, within the strategic plan. So if we think about achievement 1, which is really around enhancing teaching and learning in the strategic plan, the achievement 1 in this DEI report has to do with reading achievement and why there is disparity among different subgroups. So some of the things that we're proposing as a leadership team are revising how we address PLCs, making sure we have consistent structured protocols for looking at student data on a consistent and regular basis. We're obviously examining K-3 literacy data as a part of our district study right now and pilot. And for example, with SRBI, we want to make sure that we have very clear entrance and exit criteria. Students are not meant to sit within an SRBI process for a lengthy period of time. We should have very tight goals. We should be monitoring those goals and meeting their needs and adjusting instruction in a very timely manner so that we're not losing really important time with our students and their learning progression. So again, those are just some of the actions that you would expect to see embedded within the strategic plan where there's natural alignment between these considerations and this work that was a part of this study. And I don't know, Shirley, if you'd like to add anything.
The only thing I would add is maybe like to 2000. The only thing I would add is on the twice exceptional, looking at gifted and talented programs, how we individually look right at students now, one, ensuring that they do get their accommodations, but also if there's an area of learning difference and the child is being assessed as part of the process of the gifted and talented, we need to look at that child individually. And it's not about accommodations, it's about, is it fair to assess that area? And is there another way to assess what we're looking for? So for example, if there's a learning difference in dysgraphia or writing, and part of the test is writing, then we need to find another way to have that student tell us the story without it involving writing. So we'll be looking into that as well.
Okay, questions from the board? Thank you all for the presentation and the context. Sarah.
I just want to say thank you for making sure that this was natural and organic and in part of the whole, and that it's not a separate lane like this. I appreciate that this is fully wrapped into the work of across the whole district. So thank you for that.
Anyone else? No. All right. Again, thank you.
Greg is in it.
What's that?
Greg.
Oh, Greg.
I just had an overarching comment on the whole DI program in general. I mean, I've watched a little about this over the years. I do think this is something we need to revisit in our next strategic plan, just in general. I mean, I know when this was coming into place, it was kind of in vogue to have DI programs. I think the world has changed. We're seeing employers fully exit these programs. UNC just came out and completely got rid of their entire DI program. I think we're seeing that in college universities around the country. So I think it's just not the same as it used to be. And so I think we need to just rethink, like, that was a big reason why I think we were doing this. And so if that's no longer the case, I think we need to figure out and do it a little bit of a about face to figure out why we are.
Thank you.
I would just note that one of the reasons we were doing this, the main reason was our kids were hurting, and kids need to be seen and heard and cared for. And I just don't want us to forget that and get caught up in the, as you say, the social response back to it. We're working on a school system here, and the idea of equity for all students is something I don't think any of us are going to argue about, or maybe we are. But I just don't want us to forget the purpose of why we were doing something.
Yeah, I would say that equal outcomes for all students is something I would absolutely argue against.
That's not what we are.
That's equity and equality are very different.
Correct.
So I think when the time comes, we'll have to recalibrate where we are on what it means.
But
Because
well, the committee,
it does mean
the committee
different
itself
things.
is very clear of the understanding of it.
Yeah. Okay. First reading and discussion on proposed schedule of 2024-25 regular Board of Education meetings and subcommittee meetings.
These were just drafted as a proposal to start with. We'll be reading them again at the retreat.
When's the actual election day is what, the second?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think you just said that under your breath. I think there's the curriculum committee. I think it was the only one. Wait, I lost my paper. It's the week either of the election or right after the election. Yeah, so I'm wondering if maybe we should take a look at that one because it's a very quick turnaround to reseat.
Well, how much was it?
The November 8th.
November 8th.
curriculum.
Yeah, please take a look at election day and organization and just cross-reference it across because the board needs more than 24 hours to,
Yeah, I think that was the only one. The next
Constitute
one,
committees.
when's election day is what?
must be the second.
Election day is the 5th. Yeah, so we can't have one on the 8th, but the next one after that is the 15th, which is fine.
We also, you may notice here, just there's a wee subtle change in terms of these committee meetings. For the last week in June, we certainly are going to accommodate the finance because we got to get that in and closed out. But I would ask your understanding that the last week in June, not only is it a busy week, but it's a week where collectively my colleagues should be out with our students and celebrating the kids and instead of and maybe ourselves too somewhat. It just doesn't feel right to be stuck in a meeting when we're graduating and young people are moving up in their transition programs. And I don't know why I just felt it this year for me a wee bit that
Well, we ended up, I agree with you. We put that meeting in. It was really actually to do all the appointments. That's why we did this meeting.
no, I'm
No,
not
there's
talking
a-
about this
like,
meeting.
there was a
I'm talking
curriculum
about-
committee the morning
there
of
was-
the-
there was
Oh, the
several
committee meetings.
Committee meetings in the mornings.
Sorry.
Just, that's
But I
all.
felt that about this meeting too. This was a lot to squish in. So I would say, for next year, if we can avoid, let's use this meeting for appointments, but try to avoid using it for a board meeting. Because yes, point taken, Alan, and thank you for making sure I was paying attention. Sarah?
I don't know if Greg's gonna say this too, but just looking at this graph, it's like there's so many meetings, committee meetings.
It's 70.
It's 70. Okay. So I don't know that every subcommittee needs to meet every month. I don't, I think we need to really
Okay.
take a look at what actual work needs to get done.
I think that's fair. Like, for example, we're pretty much at the end of the policy audit and they just have the communications work to do, but it could go to maybe if each person could come back with a recommendation of a cadence for each administrative person, a preferred and recommended cadence for their committee for our next read.
That's a good idea.
Okay.
You're asking for that from us or
I'm
from-
asking from the folks who are populating the committees, the admin staff.
Okay.
to
Yeah, I was
come
gonna
back.
say like we obviously don't, well, maybe, Joe, you probably do, but we don't attend all 70 meetings, but we attend a lot of them. But Dr. Adley and others are
It's a lot
attending
of
almost all those. And so I just, there's death by a thousand cuts. There's a lot of meetings and it's prep work into meeting into prep work. And
There's a
so,
lot of meetings.
yeah,
So,
revisiting the cadence.
Jill, just one also, the communications January 3rd meeting, that's basically just 2 days after, it's the second day after winter break. I just wonder if that's realistic.
That's fair.
okay.
We also put the Jewish holiday, we moved the meeting to Thursday because generally it's celebrated for 2 nights.
I appreciate that.
So-
Thank you.
All right.
That was in September.
Okay. So the next read is going to come back, taking a look at the timing of the election versus the organizational meetings and the committee meetings. And also we'll have a recommendation from each administrative person, each administrative head for each committee about a cadence. I don't think, Rich, you get out of anything, but everybody else might.
We made it up.
Okay, we'll take a look at this, in July? Thank you also for having the committee meetings outlined. I think it's helpful to have it clear and outlined, and would love when we do finally vote on it, then it get up on the website. Okay. Further discussion on 24-25 district priorities.
So the board asked for, go back and just add in a couple of clarifying formatting things. And one of them was whether there was any legislation required, whether there was any budgetary issue, which we had done the prior time, and then sort of to classify them a little bit. We did through tier 1 that are basically immediately and required by legislation or otherwise, or State Department of Education. Tier 2 was, we were sort of, these are in phases of implementation. We added in a couple of items here that at the board's last discussion that came out of that discussion. And then tier 3, we're just sort of looking ahead, potentially that they're not legally required per se, but these would be potential new priorities in the budget moving forward, potentially.
Okay,
And it just sort of gives us the scope of the concepts.
I find the adjustments helpful. Thank you for doing another iteration. Dave, go ahead.
Just one question on the EduPlanet in bucket 3 and the UBD, UDL in bucket 2. I was just, should those not be in the same, or that was my only question?
Thank you for the question. I asked the same. Rich, do you want to take that one? Because I think the answer is more financial than teaching and learning.
So for the EduPlanet item, there's going to be a request in next year's budget, not the school year coming up, but the following year to expand the number of licenses. So that's more of a look ahead as opposed to the current year.
Got it. Appreciate that. And then from the last meeting, there was a question about kind of getting an amalgamated number around all the curriculum development and various spread around. I don't know if that's still in the works.
I did send it to Amy for her to craft into the other memo, so I'm assuming that'll go out soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Rich.
I appreciate the board's patience. We've been closing up the school year and had our first day of retreat. So what I did share with the board is that we have a very accurate count of each course and the units within each course and the percent of completion for that. Something that will be outstanding and a little bit more challenging to measure will be some of the areas where curriculum hasn't been developed yet, but is statutorily required, like elementary health, for example, or school counseling, some of these other areas. But we know exactly where the curriculum is in each department.
Great. So I wasn't complaining for the lack of turnaround time. I appreciate you guys are doing the work. So thank you. For
Well, it's on my head that I haven't gotten it yet. So thank you for the patience with that.
Of course.
So tier 1 and tier 2, you probably don't need to hear much from us. Do you need any feedback from us on tier 3 or 4?
Not really. I mean, they're on the table, and you know they're on the table. You know the concept, so when they come around, they're not going to be surprises. I'd still, at some point, you're going to have to. If you want to defer school start times, I'm recommending we don't do it. But potentially there's ways of touching it by other recommendations. But so that just depends whether the board wants to definitively just say, take a position on it or not.
Okay, and you also have the student information system and the T-shirt leadership academy in that tier 4.
Correct.
Why are those also in tier 4?
So the rollout of the evaluate the student information system would be, we would do the evaluation of it this year, but the whole rollout is multi-year. And the teacher leadership academy is, it potentially can come on to this year. Right? So it's a new priority. So
Okay,
it's just a new priority.
okay. Sarah?
In tier 3 and tier 4, these are not ranked in your priority, right? They're
Not within that, right?
Not within them. Okay. And then you've mentioned a couple times the school start times and then changing PLC times. I think before the board can understand, what that means and if we're deferring school start times or not, I know you don't have anything specific right now, but just, I want to understand that conversation
All
more.
right, but I just don't want to hold up if the board wants to make a decision on school start times, you can make a decision on school start times. If one of the options is a later start time, there's money associated with, increased PLC time. There is monies associated with that we have noted here potentially. But, well, it's a board prerogative. You want to say you want to wait until, see how that plays out, if it comes to the table or not, that's okay too. But that's your prerogative to do that. I just don't want to be like, if you're waiting for the superintendent to bring this other proposal forward, well, we will bring something forward, whether it aligns to that or not. It might, I just can't commit to that, right, until the work is done on it. So if you want to defer that discussion until then, that's okay. But you may be a decision to make either way.
Can I just ask a clarifying question about the changes, the professional learning for staff, the 219,000? I understand that it's associated with costs of bus logistics and schedule changes. But can you just give a little more information about what exactly this would be trying to achieve?
Where are you trying?
The tier 3 professional learning for staff.
So one way of it, look, one way or the other, we're going to have to look at the additional time for staff. It came out of the NASC recommendation that we received to provide time for it. It's come out of it's in the strategic plan as supporting the professional growth and opportunities for teachers. It's a little bit in the presentation here this evening. So that's one variation. If we increase the number of PLC days at the high school, just because of the bus rotation, that's what it would cost. But you could make a decision as a board and go whether want to do the school start time or no, we're not going to do it regardless. And the one of the proposals of increasing PLC times could offset that a little bit and actually lean into the late opportunities for students to come to school, but not exclusively across the district though. So I don't know does that help or not?
Yep. Dave?
Thanks. I just had a follow-up, Alan. I know you put this together quickly since the last time we talked, and I know things can change, whether it's a directive from the state or a pressing need. Given the turnaround, do you feel that this list is comprehensive of what we should expect to see coming forward as we look into next year in the budget, or are there any other things waiting in the wings? I just want to make sure that we're fully informed as to how you're looking at this.
No, so these are like a good flush. I said to the administrative team today, we're trying not to create new initiatives per se, right? There's enough going on in the district. So this is one. And when you see in like some of the goals that we have for board goals and efficiencies, there may be other efficiencies, like as an example, look for efficiencies. Okay, well, I may not have identified them right here. We may have a few we're thinking of, but may not have identified those. So I will never preclude, like, listen, I'm not going to drop a bomb on the situation, but I can never preclude that something's not going to come up that I would need to put on the table. But essentially, we think we're covering the basis with this list.
So broad thematically.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
Thanks, Alan.
Yeah.
So you'll use this to inform how you update the strat plan? Kind of what are the next steps?
Well, well, the board asked me to do this, so in the sense of like present this, so in presenting it, we will use this to, well, we'll be working around the 23rd for the retreat. There's a proposal that to come back with are the priorities. Well, these sort of are the priorities for the most part. Yes.
Okay, so maybe from between the 23rd and the August, you'll have a full strat plan. We'll have what, and yeah.
Well, yes. So we have I think it's on the agenda tonight, anyway, so we can discuss that when we get there. Yes.
Okay.
These cover the basis basically.
Okay. So everything on here is a priority for you except for school start times, simply because of the size of it.
One way or the other.
Okay.
Can I just ask a quick question? Will we have additional information for, I'm looking at, for instance, the student information system. Between now and July 23rd, will we have any additional information or guidance to help us make a decision about what the priority of that, or between each of these options in terms of ranking of these? I'm assuming that many of these might end up being in the budget that would be presented in January.
So
priority.
in the goals, we presented a couple of presentations that we would do, because essentially we're looking at rolling this out really early. That's what we're doing. That's what this task is essentially.
Right.
So in there are a variety. I'll look and see if that was the one. I don't think that is one of them because we'll have to do a little bit more work than that. But essentially we'll be doing presentations on some of these items. I don't know. I don't think anything before the 23rd is going to be different.
I mean, it's just because some of them are potentially a big lift over, if that's a multi-year kind of a thing. And I think in order to decide, yes, let's do that versus some of the other priorities, I think it would be helpful to just have a bit more information about the why.
So some of these will show up kind of in the coming months as discussion points.
Oh, they all will. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Greg has his hand. Oh, Greg.
Just, but I see the way you laid this out with like, there's the first group, which is all the tiers, which seems almost like the action items versus the second set, which is the goals, where you've kind of included some of the action items. My question is, as it relates to the goals, like if there's changes to these or we suggest
Mr. Gramley,
changes.
are you on the next one or are you looking at the priorities?
Well, I'm kind of tying them together.
Okay.
Okay.
Like, if you were going to go through the next one, I wasn't sure if you were going to go through the next one and then.
Do you want to go to the next one and then
We can go
kind
there.
of talk about how they relate to each other?
They are tied together though, right?
Somehow. They relate to one
They
another.
kind of are tied together. Yes.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead. I jumped the gun.
Well, you can continue discussion in a second. I just wanted to show, this is our collective effort from the administrative team to hear the board, but they're board goals, right? So they're not like administrative goals, although we work together and what's the strategic plan goals, that they should all tie together here. We did, I'll just talk just in general and then we can go back into details. This is not how we think you should do this. This is simply so you're not working from a blank piece of paper. If you want more goals, great. If you want less goals, great. If you want to decide how to measure stuff, and in fact, I really do want us to agree on, not necessarily tonight on these measurements, but we should agree on essentially from the strategic plan to this, to what are the measurements that we're going to agree on doing, because that's what we want to do. You could say, why are you writing a goal about metrics? Well, I think the board wanted me to write a goal specific about metrics. If you don't, that's okay too. But I'm also very willing to listen, work with board members on what that goal should be and what it should look like. You can see what we put down. Now I'm going to talk just globally for a moment. Goal 2, we thought that we surely should have a teaching and learning goal, and then the board's oversight and governance of some of those important teaching and learning matters. The alignment to the strategic work with the budget. So this is a proposed budget. So sort of being a wee bit more tightly connected to the strategic plan, the board goals. We also are bringing this thing, I think it's just, it's going to start in October, bringing it forward earlier. That's really, the budget season never really stopping, but you get the wee sense there. There's where some of the presentations we've just noted that we would do. Goal 4, I just think that as long as the projects are on the table, we should keep a governance and oversight on that. I thought we would want to continue the communication. I don't think that that's ever enough, right? So we did a reflush on that. So that's what would be up for discussion but at the next board meeting too. So I'm happy to discuss it tonight, and I'm also happy to change anything. They are board goals, so.
So this is the first read. We'll have a second read. I think that if there are specific points kind of deeper into the goals, we can handle those by email in the interest of time. But broadly, we want to make sure directionally, these are what the board wants to focus on from a high level. Are we missing anything? In terms of what we think and again, the idea of the board goals are the ones that we hold ourselves accountable to. So kind of to your point of nothing aligning, Greg, so be it, but it doesn't align to our self-evaluation tool. But when we go in and self-evaluate, we want to look at ourselves against how we did on our goals. Sarah.
I am just sharing that our eagle-eyed Julie Best said that these are draft boards. It says approved goals at the top.
Oh,
that was her comment.
Sorry about that. But they are drafted.
Yeah. Robin?
Just one on the metrics piece specifically. I'm just wondering how this would actually get done. I'm assuming because it's probably very data and systems specific in terms of how operationally this would even be able to be tracked, that we would need guidance from the administration on what metrics and kind of how we could actually do this in a way that could be tracked and where we have the data and we have the systems. And because it's a pretty, for every kind of indicator on this strategic plan, it's a lot of data, and I would want to make sure that it's managed appropriately.
I think you need some sort of variation of a data dashboard of some description.
Yes.
But I'm happy to engage with any board members who would like to be part of that discussion of how you track it, how we represent it.
We might have to think of something to pilot or some things, rather than every single item top to toe. So I think it's a good question of how we'd go about it, but yes.
But is the administration coming up with a proposed list of different metrics that they would think could be viable, as opposed to us kind of coming up with our own? I guess that's.
Well, I think Greg has a list of metrics he's interested in tracking that, I think if board members have, sorry to point you out, but you've already gone through it. If board members have specific things they want to see tracked, we can start to compile some of that and look at where we want to focus as a board. So I think it's a good point. You can't just say, I want to do metrics and, wave your wand. We need to be fairly methodical about it. So I think it's probably worth the board thinking about a couple of areas where we want to prioritize. So maybe if in coming back to this goal on the 23rd, board members could be ready to talk to an area or areas that they want to prioritize. And if you all in return, Alan, could come back with some of the areas that you think are most viable as a first step in moving this forward. And certainly board members don't have to wait till the 23rd if they want to email something in beforehand for the administration to contemplate in terms of their value as a first step. Greg.
Yeah, so I'm happy to send around. I think there's a big question is like, what is trackable? Some of these things you don't know what you can track or not. So that's an important part of it. And what's the cadence and all that. On this list versus the prior list, my question was going to be just around, as we make changes to this, I could potentially see there being an impact on the first list of the action items to get this done. So there may be some iteration required, like, for example, within this list, I think on goal number 2, like one of the things that I would think would be on this list is reducing turnover and bench planning across both the faculty as well as the teachers. So just thinking about, like, I don't know how that maybe impacts the first list. It could, it could not. For us, as Jill had mentioned, just in terms of self-reflecting on the board, like thinking about what the budget process looks like, that to me is a pretty important goal. I don't know if that is in one of these goals, one of the strategies within these goals, or somewhere else, but that's something that I would certainly have on the list for the upcoming year. And then from a timing perspective, if we are trying to roll this out, as Dr. Adley mentioned, sooner rather than later, I think like if board members, and I'm happy to do this for myself, like have other thoughts, we should try to get that well ahead of 23rd so that we can get a new version of this to iterate on, to get it incorporated in so that we make that more productive versus trying to do it all in
Yes.
one day.
Yes. Greg, I just want to make sure I captured it correctly. You indicated bench planning and reducing turnover are two things you'd want to capture. I think probably separate from teaching and learning, I think probably separately in an HR.
Yeah,
goal.
just to focus
Was there
on-
another third component or you were just,
Turnover reduction, bench planning, and then the budget with the,
and then the budget?
yeah,
Okay.
revisiting the budget process.
Okay. And that should be inside of goal 3, that alignment of work with the,
The first two maybe would be under goal 2, teaching and learning.
the bench planning and teaching and learning, I actually would like
I
to
don't
pull
know.
out as a separate HR piece because teaching
It
and
could
learning,
be.
I think, is the academic side. I think you're talking about an HR. But I think the board is happy to be explicit. There is some in the strat plan, March, already about this. But we have our own components. of
Do you notice you have a speech list there?
What's that?
Did you notice you have a speech list there? March?
She was speechless.
That's okay.
Is there anything you want to add, March?
Be sure.
But in terms of the budget, so yes, looking at the budget process should be embedded inside of goal 3. So if there's anything missing in terms of the iteration, it needs to show up in goal 3.
Okay.
Dave.
Just as a follow-up on the budget, just thinking about that, I think there was a nice job done in the covering email this year, talking about what the key drivers are of our budget, personnel, things that are fixed cost, et cetera. Look great at the high level. We didn't see that follow through. So we wound up getting into discussions on the line items where we can look at line items, but some really weren't in play. And so
Right.
just making sure we have that and that's visible as we actually work through, so we can focus on what's actually, what levers we can
In
really
play.
pull.
Yep. Yep. Okay. All right, so if any other feedback, please send to Alan with me and copy.
And I will just mention, just since you're talking about this, I do appreciate the board's understanding of some of the timing because we had a very productive discussion today with the entire administrative staff going over the strategic plan, going over the presentation we did before for the end of the year and also looking ahead to next year. Is there things in there that make sense, don't make sense? Do we want to make any revisions before we bring it to the board? So that was time well spent and appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. The next piece is review draft agenda for board summer retreat. Based on some of what we're discussing, we might end up tweaking a little of this, but just if there's anything on here, yes, Dave.
So it's not what's on here, it's what's missing. What's missing was steal Greg's thunder. And I know we do this when we do our board budget Saturday, Super Saturday. We do have some, albeit aspirational time limits or timing for certain discussions baked into that budget discussion. Here we have lunch well delineated, but not some of the other conversations. Would love to see you get breakdown on some of this if possible.
Meeting, actual meeting planning?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Would you like me to talk to this?
No, we'll just do it. We'll just set some timelines and things to.
No,
make
do you
sure.
want me to talk to these items?
Oh, no, unless anybody has a question. Katie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
I did have a question about a couple of things on here, read to me like regular meeting topics. So I was
So
curious.
so to be very frank about it, you're accommodating the superintendent's schedule here. There is usually another meeting that we have for July, and then you have a summer retreat. We're collapsing the 2 into 1. So there are some rudimentary things that would ordinarily be like an evening meeting type thing. So there's not a lot of them though, right? But so that's.
Okay, well, I appreciate that clarification. And I think, to Dave's point about timing, that's helpful. There's a lot of things during the year that we're kind of like, oh, that's for the retreat. And I want to make sure that we have the time to work on those. There was one thing on here that I felt had been settled a couple of times already this year that I was curious about, which was 7G fees for clubs and athletics. I felt that the board had taken a sense twice that this was not something it wanted to pursue.
Is that meant to be fees for clubs and athletics, or is that meant to be the conversation that Julie asked for?
I think it's meant to be the conversation that Julie
so we'll
asked for.
read
So
in
some
that.
of these, some of these, we put down, not that they're just definitive things in the sense of the way they're described, but for the board here to say exactly what you're saying. What is this? And do we actually want to do this? Do we, and actually look for clarification of what you actually do want to do with it.
Yep.
So that's one of them. The other one that's open is special education.
That was my question.
Right,
What
so,
does that mean?
Well, I thought the board wanted to have some discussion on special education. So I'm happy to have it if you tell me what that would be. I just didn't want to leave certain things off that I've heard at this table and specifically around this agenda.
Okay, well, I tell you what, I'm not sure I know exactly, I don't want a broad-based discussion on special education topics. So if there's some people who have thoughts on what they would really like to see, send them in and we'll craft an actual agenda item around it that is more pointed than broad-based. That's just too much to prepare for. It's like writing a graduation speech. Where do you start?
No, well, that's why I said I want to go through this because I need help in some of these.
Okay, all right, so board members will weigh in the next 10 days, not business days, calendar days. If they'd like something on special ed, and that will give you enough time to prepare, Shirley. Okay. And we can send a reminder.
And the attorney and Patrice will be here and I've committed to being here.
Okay. I think the preliminary discussion and possible action on fiscal year 26 budget and goals and strategic plan goals, in some ways, those are, never mind. There may be some overlap, but we'll figure it out. Okay. Any other points on this? Personnel report, Rich.
So just quickly, I think you see the beginning of the good work that we did in negotiations because the first 3 certified hires that we made are at the bottom of the salary schedule and we were totally competitive with the other districts that they were looking at. This is the first time since I've been here that that's the case.
Great.
So it makes your job easier? what you're saying?
Yes, much easier. I mean, I still look real bad, but.
Good. Okay, and then, thank you much. I'll take a motion to table 9A. John, seconded by Dave. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, public comment.
If any person would like to participate in public comment, please come up to the podium and wait for the chair to recognize you. Please state your name and address for the record, and you will have up to 3 minutes to comment. Okay, there is no public comment at this time. If anyone online would like to participate in public comment, please use the raised hand icon. And there are no raised hands at this time.
Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn? That's John, seconded by Sarah. All those in favor, that's unanimous. Thank you all and have a good night. Happy summer.